PST, which is the normal time, but I decided not to because I got banned from Twitter, and yeah, I decided to just say fuck it, let's go live. So yeah, the topic for today is legal self-defense and left-wing liberation in North America, or liberation in North America in general. So I want to start talking about like why self-defense is appropriate, I guess, because that's where I have the most insight, and where I did a lot of thinking on, I guess, this weekend. And I want to talk about the Holocaust and like times prior to the Holocaust. And I'm only going to touch on that very, very briefly to outline some points, probably. And that is like, what the Jews in Germany prior to World War II or the Holocaust, they had guns and things of that nature. There were, in the 1920s, there were a lot of socialists, there were a lot of communists in the German legislature, but they still didn't, they still weren't, despite having guns in the 1920s, and despite there being Jews and socialists and communists in the German legislature prior to Hitler's rise to power and whatnot, they were still able to be genocided and exterminated. Obviously, I don't need to cover the details of how bad that was. And I can't say why that was. I'm not an expert in all this by any means, but I can say that if those Jews had guns, and they had people representing them in Congress or whatever the equivalent was back then, then and they had like 10 years notice that, hey, this guy's gonna fucking come along and start rounding you all up and killing you, well, then they probably could have prevented. And I'm not saying that to highlight anything other than the fact that hindsight is 2020, right? And we're lucky. Like today, we are lucky because we now have hindsight. We now have that hindsight. We can now say that Hitler could come, right? And we can now say that climate change is going to start devastating more of the country in under 10 to 15 years. And obviously that climate change is going to come with all sorts of civil unrest, I guess you could say, as is natural for like natural disasters and wide scale natural disasters. So I definitely think that the left needs to get rid of its like taboo towards guns. And I'm not advocating illegal gun ownership. Everyone should legally own a gun. And I say that because like so many people already own a gun in this country, right? Like the rich white people own guns in the suburbs, and the people in the poorer neighborhoods in the inner city, they own guns too, right? I mean, that's not up for debate. That's a fact. I lived there. I've lived in both kind of spaces. Everyone's got fucking guns. Or I've been in both spaces and I've lived in one of them. I've never lived in like a super wealthy white suburb, I guess you could say. And I wouldn't want to, but I have been in them. So we definitely need to get past our taboo with guns. And, I hear a lot of liberals and even, even people who are genuinely, concerned about like things like school shootings, and school shootings are absolutely horrible. And they do bring up a serious like a sickness in our society that has to be addressed, but that sickness can't be addressed by disarming the population, right? Because if you go around trying to disarm the population, it's quite clear what's going to happen, right? The people that you disarm are predominantly going to be Black people. If you pass more gun laws, they're predominantly going to target Black people. So you can't pass these laws because they're fucking racist, and they're going to get people killed. So what do you do? What do you do? Now, I mean, this is just my idea, and maybe people think that's crazy, but I think that you need to integrate gun education into K through 12. Maybe not K, that's a little young, but you can have, at a certain age, you can start teaching kids, institutionally speaking, gun responsibility, and when they graduate at the age of 18 from high school, you can give them their first gun, and you should be training them in responsibility and all that up until then. And this should all be institutionalized, because if you start trying to take away people's guns, then people start dying, and it's mostly going to be black people. And that's already happening. So every black person needs to be given a gun. Every white person needs to be given a gun. Every Latino person, every American citizen who wants one needs to be given a gun. Otherwise, it's racist. That's not necessarily because I think people not having guns is racist, but I think when you start having huge portions of the population who legally own guns and huge portions of the population who don't legally own guns, that's racist. And it gets people killed. It got Deon K killed, right? If Deon K, who died in Southeast DC, had been a rich white dude traveling around Washington, DC with his fucking, rifle, he wouldn't have been murdered by MPD. If guns were acceptable, he might not have. Well, if black people were acceptable, he might not have been murdered by a racist cop. But these things are progress, and I think you need to start with having an equal distribution of I guess, the capacity for self-defense. Yeah, you need an equal distribution of the capacity for self-defense within America's communities, bottom line. Otherwise, it's racist. Now, it's going to be impossible to change laws in places like Washington, D.C. So for activists, I want to talk about alternatives, right? Alternatives to owning guns. Now, in Washington, D.C., for example, you can own a shotgun. The process to get one is quite lengthy, takes about 90 days, and you can't, have all these things on your record or whatever. That being said, what you can do is you can learn martial arts, right? I was learning judo from a comrade of mine prior to me leaving Washington, D.C. And it was really unfortunate because I love those classes. He could tell you that I wasn't as good at saying I wanted to actually do them. And I got tired out really easy because at the time I was I'm still in bad shape, but I was in worse shape than I was back then. And I was a smoker, and I'm not a smoker now. So I have a bit more stamina than I used to. And I wish I still had that resource, that comrade near me, so I could learn. However, we were going to start community self-defense classes in Malcolm X Park. But unfortunately, another wave of COVID came along and and ruined those plans. And then by the time, and then I had to move, basically. And then I had to leave for financial reasons, rather. So that was unfortunate, but I definitely do recommend that, groups of activists start taking self-defense seriously, like MMA and mixed martial arts and various forms of martial arts. It's really important. And you know what, I think about like the Proud Boys, right? And how they came to Washington, D.C. If we had you see these black blocs out in D.C. sometimes. And I'm thinking, if every one of those people knew martial arts, if every one of those people was carrying a fucking pole with a flag on it, obviously you want a flag on it, you're waving your pole. But if some Proud Boy comes at you with a fucking knife in Washington, D.C., and you're with, a couple people, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe even 6 people, And you all know martial arts, and you're all carrying a flagpole. Those Proud Boys aren't going to come at you, and if they do, they're going to fucking regret it. And it reminds me of almost of like the concept of democratic centralism, which again, not an expert in, but I do know a little bit about it. And I do know that democratic centralism as a political formation was specifically created to fight a war, to fight wars on multiple fronts. It is a warlike political formation, and it works because of that. Because I think I'm going to botch this quote, but I think someone said, politics is oh gosh, it's like politics is like, oh god, I need to look this quote up. Politics is violence or something. Politics, it's a Mao quote, of course it's a Mao quote. Politics is war without bloodshed, while war is politics with bloodshed. And it's true, right? Politics is more than just who gets in office, right? Politics is about your freedom. Politics is about our freedom. So, I definitely think that we need to remove this taboo of being afraid to defend ourselves, right? I think that especially the newer folks, they need to the newer folks to the movement, they need to start looking at the reasons things happened in the past and start exploring the concepts of like more militant military formations, and not necessarily to enact any sort of violence. I don't advocate violence by any means, but I do think that if I'm reminded of, again, outside of 4D in, outside of 4D in Washington, D.C., and I've referenced this a few times since I started doing these short little live streams. And I'm reminded of Karan Hilton's mother. Karan Hilton's mother, again, I've mentioned her too. She was fucking out there. She was like frontlining that shit. And they kept arresting her. And there were like tons of cops out there. But she could have been de-arrested multiple times. And right, they were arresting her because they realized once they arrested her, people would stop getting upset and they'd, eventually they'd pack up and go home. She was kind of like a catalyst, right? She was bringing out people's anger. She was showing people that, this is my pain, right? And this is your pain. This is okay. This is okay to express because we're trying to get justice, right? But then they would arrest her so that she could no longer show us her pain, and that we felt less safe expressing our pain or less comfortable expressing our pain, right? And so that's why they would arrest Karan Hilton's mother. It's like a counterinsurgency thing. Now I'm wondering if you had a contingent of motherfuckers surrounding that woman at all times with fucking flagpoles, with fucking flagpoles, not guns, but flagpoles, legally owned items, who know mixed martial arts, and those cops tried to arrest her, it might not have gone so well, or they might have been a bit more hesitant to arrest her. And if they had kept on trying, they would have to bring more and more people. The situation would have gotten escalated. And, you'd have it all over the national media because we were prepared to actually fight back instead of just calling a protest. And, that's why I think we need to start shying away from like self-defense, because at the end of the day, self-defense is born self-defense with full capacity is born of military mindset and a military formation. I was going to read a chapter of The Art of War, but I couldn't find one that I liked well enough, and it's been so long since I read it. And I got wrapped up. So I'm not going to read The Art of War, but I will say that it's really important to show that like the more militant parts of this movement, like it's important to show that we're not just lashing out, right? And you know what? I'm guilty as well. I am. I'm super guilty. Well, no, I'm not guilty. I'm totally innocent. But I am guilty of having anger towards this system and occasionally not using it in the most productive fashion. And that can, it's not necessarily, well, I don't want to nitpick, but what I will say is that anger would be far more, effective if there was like a military formation at these events. And I'm not saying for the sake of, overthrowing anyone. I'm not saying that. What I am saying is it's for the sake of our own protection, especially against groups like the Proud Boys, who aren't just going to disappear because Trump is gone, right? They're going to find a new charismatic leader, and they may take a while to do so, but they're going to find a new charismatic leader. And when they do find a younger, new charismatic leader, it's gonna get fucking real, because Donald Trump is right. He's like an oligarch, right? He is beholden to prior existing structures of power. A new charismatic sort of fascist leader in America is probably going to be a lot younger. He's not going to rely or I'm assuming it's going to be a he because they're misogynistic as fuck. He's going to be a lot younger. And he's not going to care as much about electoral politics as people like to harp on. He's not going to care about, what this senator says or what that senator says. He's going to care about like organizing and building his mass movement. And you have Donald Trump right now. Really, he just beat his Assange case, and there was a rumor, or there was reports. It wasn't a rumor. There was reports from actual journalists who have access, talking about how I guess Trump traded a pardon for Assange, Ross Ulbricht, Snowden, forbidding his impeachment, which at the time I said he was going to, then go and create a political party, because he had mentioned creating a political party in the past. And now it looks like that's becoming more and more likely, right? So Trump is going to spend the next 4 years or so attempting to build his fascist power base, and not only build his fascist power base, but consolidate his fascist power base. And I think that's important, because anyone who knows anything knows that, the factions of the ruling class in this country are all fascists, right? That being said, there are certain factions of them that are more overtly violent and more overtly racist. And that's the faction we're talking about here, and that's the faction that I think is worrying me quite a bit, because I understand that fascists need charismatic leaders. There's plenty of them to go around, unfortunately. The one hope is that like most of these people are so stupid that they might not be able to like actually be unified. But we'll see what happens. That Patriot Front dude, I can't remember his name, nor do I want to, but he was pretty charismatic. I think he seemed to, for a young kid, he seemed to bring a lot of racists together, right? And that's scary. But when we talk about fascism in America, we can't talk about who they are going to be in 4 years. We have to talk about who they're going to be in 10 years, right? 15 years. What the future looks like for fascism in America is beyond just like our immediate scope, right? So Yeah, we got to start taking those things seriously. Just because the election is over doesn't mean Trump's gone. And we need to break the stigma surrounding self defense. We need to put teeth back into our movement. We have no teeth, right? Like the fascists of this country have teeth, right? The impeachment for Trump would have passed if that vote had been anonymous. And do you know why it didn't pass? Because Congress is afraid of pissing off more white people, right? They don't want another fascist uprising, right? They're afraid. Every single one of them's afraid. Every single one of them's afraid. And I'm not remarking on the legitimacy of that fear. Well, I think it is. Yeah, no, I'm not remarking on the legitimacy of that fear. I don't necessarily have a fully thought out opinion one way or another. But what I am saying is that everyone in Congress is afraid of pissing off the white racists in this country again. And that much is evident by, Biden's talking about unity. Okay, well, why do we want unity with these people? It's because Biden's afraid of triggering another insurrection, right? I mean, every single one of them's afraid. And that fear is getting concessions. That fear got their leader unimpeached, right? And why is that fear there? Because the fucking white people, these fucking crazy fucks, were like, I don't give a fuck. I'm going in. No, I'm not saying that was well thought out. It was clearly very poorly thought out. They weren't even wearing masks, which is hilarious. But they're afraid. The government is afraid, right? The government has been shaken to its core, and they're not pretending. They're pretending like that. Man, it's not the case. But we all know that this shit was in the military. This shit is in the police departments. This shit is in intelligence agencies and other various branches of law enforcement. It's fucking everywhere, right? So the bottom line is that Congress is afraid of the white people, and Congress is afraid of the white people because they lashed out. Because they lashed out with significant force. There's this, and I don't know about y'all. I'm not afraid of fascists, right? They can kill me. I don't give a fuck. What I am afraid of is fascists taking over this country. But unlike Congress, I think it's on us to confront that fear, because Congress is just going to run away. Right, that's what Congress does. They hide from their problems. They pretend they don't exist, right, until it blows up in their face like it did on the 6th. And if we want to fix the balance of power in this country between us and these reactionary fascist forces, we have to take self-defense seriously. They're militarized. Why aren't we? It's stupid. It's ceding ground to fascists. Anyways, I think that's a super short stream. If I have some other thoughts, maybe I'll go live later today. But I think that's it. So well, power to the people. Arm yourselves legally. Thank you. Don't be stupid. Don't do stupid things.